The CNN studio went silent when Charlie Kirk tried to embarrass Jasmine Crockett on live TV, until she exposed his fake degree claims and flipped the entire debate. Hit like, subscribe now. The tension in the CNN studio crackled like electricity before a storm. Charlie Kirk sat behind the debate desk with the smugness of someone who had never truly been challenged, his fingers drumming against the surface as he prepared to demolish yet another opponent with his trademark blend of aggression and condescension. Across from him, Representative Jasmine Crockett arranged a simple manila folder with the quiet precision of someone setting a trap. The bright studio lights caught the sheen of sweat already forming on Kirk's forehead, though he didn't know yet that he should be nervous. In exactly 3 minutes and 47 seconds, his entire persona as an education critic would crumble under the weight of his own hypocrisy, exposed by a woman he had dismissed as just another liberal elite. The audience of millions watching live would witness not just a debate loss, but the complete destruction of a carefully constructed media image. Grassroots born, remarkably prepared, and bold. Known for sharp intellect and fearless truth-telling, feared not just for rhetoric but for rigorous facts and data. Jasmine Crockett had risen from humble beginnings in St. Louis, where her grandmother taught her that knowledge was the only weapon that couldn't be taken away. She had worked her way through law school waiting tables and tutoring, understanding the value of education not as an abstract concept but as a lifeline out of poverty. Her reputation in Congress was built on meticulous preparation. She never entered a debate without knowing more about her opponent than they knew about themselves. Conservative activist and loud media figure. Arrogant, dismissive, known for attacking higher education despite controversy about his own incomplete college credentials. Charlie Kirk had built an empire on telling young conservatives that college was a scam, that degrees were worthless, that real success came from rejecting the academic establishment. His Turning Point USA organization recruited on college campuses he simultaneously derided, a contradiction he navigated through sheer force of personality and the assumption that no one would dare challenge his narrative about his own educational background. The CNN primetime debate stage blazed under studio lights that transformed every gesture into potential history. The cameras, multiple angles capturing every micro-expression, broadcast live to millions of homes where Americans had gathered to witness what was billed as a clash over the future of education in America. The studio audience represented a cross-section of the divide. College students drowning in debt, parents wondering if they should push their children toward degrees, workers who felt left behind by an economy that demanded credentials they didn't have. Journalists filled the media section, their laptops open, fingers poised to transform sound bites into headlines. The stakes transcended typical cable news theater. This was about education and economic opportunity, core cultural flashpoints that determined whether America would remain a land of opportunity or become a nation of inherited advantages. Every word spoken would influence decisions in households across the country. Should young people pursue higher education despite the cost? Was the anti-college movement protecting students from debt or condemning them to limited opportunities? The very concept of expertise and knowledge was on trial, with Kirk positioning himself as the prosecutor despite questionable standing to do so. The debate began with Kirk in full attack mode, his style honed through hundreds of campus confrontations where volume often substituted for substance. He had clearly prepared what he thought would be devastating attacks on Crockett's educational background, intending to paint her as an out-of-touch elite who didn't understand real Americans. Representative Crockett, Kirk began, his voice dripping with manufactured populist anger. You sit there with your fancy law degree, your congressional salary paid for by hard-working Americans who never had the privilege of your elite education, and you want to tell them they need to go into debt for pieces of paper that mean nothing in the real world? He leaned forward, his signature move when he thought he was landing a killing blow. You represent everything wrong with the educational establishment, gatekeeping success behind credentials while real entrepreneurs and innovators build America without your permission slips from ivory towers. The attack was designed to put Crockett on the defensive, to make her defend her education and thereby seem elitist. It was a tactic Kirk had used successfully dozens of times. But Crockett didn't take the bait. Instead, she listened with the patience of someone who knew the trap being set and had already prepared a counter-trap. Mr. Kirk, she began, her voice calm and measured, I'm happy to discuss my education. I worked 3 jobs to pay for college. I took out loans I'm still paying back. I studied by streetlight when my electricity got cut off. My degree wasn't a privilege. It was a sacrifice my entire family made because we believed education was the path to a better life. Kirk tried to interrupt, but Crockett continued with quiet authority. But since you brought up educational credentials, let's discuss yours. You've built an entire movement telling young people that college is worthless, that degrees don't matter. You've personally profited millions from this message. So I have to ask, what qualifies you to evaluate the worth of something you never completed? The studio audience stirred. This wasn't the direction Kirk had expected. His face reddened slightly as he launched into his prepared defense. I left college to build a movement, he declared, his voice rising. I didn't need a piece of paper to create one of the most influential conservative organizations in America. I'm proof that success doesn't require bowing to the academic establishment. You left college, Crockett repeated slowly, as if tasting the words. That's interesting phrasing, Mr. Kirk. Left implies a choice. But isn't it true that your departure from Harper College wasn't entirely voluntary? Kirk's eyes widened slightly, a tell that Crockett noted with satisfaction. He hadn't expected her to know about Harper College, the community college he briefly attended before his career as a conservative activist began. I don't know what conspiracy theories you've been reading, Kirk said, attempting to regain control through dismissal, but I made a choice to pursue real-world success instead of wasting time in liberal indoctrination centers. Crockett reached for her manila folder with deliberate calm. Mr. Kirk, I have here your academic transcript from Harper College. You attended for less than one semester. Your GPA was 0.0. You didn't leave to pursue success. You were academically dismissed for never attending classes after the first week. The gasp from the audience was audible. Kirk's face went from red to pale. That's a private document. You can't have that. This is a violation of... It's part of public record from a lawsuit filed by your former roommate, Crockett interrupted smoothly. He sued you for unpaid rent, claiming you spent tuition money on other things while pretending to attend classes. The transcript was entered as evidence. You've built an empire on attacking education you never actually tried to get. Kirk attempted to pivot, his voice becoming more aggressive. This is character assassination. We're supposed to be debating education policy, not... We are debating education policy, Crockett cut him off. And your policy is that millions of Americans should skip college based on your advice. But you didn't skip college to become an entrepreneur, Mr. Kirk. You failed out and then retroactively claimed it was a choice. There's a difference between choosing a different path and being unable to walk the first one. The studio had gone completely silent except for the hum of cameras capturing every second. Kirk's usual confident demeanor was cracking, replaced by something desperate. My success speaks for itself, he nearly shouted. I've built a multi-million-dollar organization. I've influenced policy. You've monetized other people's educational insecurities, Crockett interrupted, her voice still devastatingly calm. You tell working-class kids that college is a scam while recruiting on the very campuses you claim are worthless. Your organization's own statistics show that 87% of your leadership team has college degrees. You hire people with the credentials you tell others not to pursue. She pulled another document from her folder. This is your organization's job posting from last month. Bachelor's degree required, master's preferred. You require degrees for jobs at the organization dedicated to telling people degrees don't matter. How do you explain that, Mr. Kirk? Kirk's mouth opened and closed, but no words came out. The confident debater who had steamrolled hundreds of college students was being systematically dismantled by someone who had done what he couldn't: complete her education despite real obstacles. But let's talk about your claimed expertise, Crockett continued, pressing her advantage. You've written books about education. You give speeches at education summits. You advise politicians on education policy. What exactly qualifies you to do any of this? Experience. Kirk managed to sputter. Real-world experience. I don't need a degree to. To what? Crockett challenged. To tell other people that the education you couldn't complete is worthless? To profit from convincing young people to limit their opportunities based on your personal failure? You're not an education expert, Mr. Kirk. You're an education dropout who found a way to monetize your own academic inadequacy. The brutality of the assessment, delivered with such calm precision, sent shockwaves through the studio. But Crockett wasn't finished. She had saved her most devastating revelation for last. There's one more thing, she said, pulling out a final document. You've claimed in multiple interviews to have a degree from Principia College. You've listed it on speaking engagement bios. You've allowed yourself to be introduced as a college graduate at conservative events. But Principia College has no record of you ever enrolling, let alone graduating. You didn't just fail to complete a degree, Mr. Kirk. You've been lying about having one. The silence that followed was deafening. Kirk's face had gone from pale to ashen. His hands, usually gesticulating wildly during debates, lay still on the desk. The man who had built a career on aggressive confrontation had been reduced to shocked silence. And that's when Jasmine Crockett delivered the line that would echo through political history. You criticize degrees you never earned, while millions pursue education you tell them to avoid. Who's really the fraud here, Charlie? The room gasped collectively. The word fraud hung in the air like an accusation that couldn't be taken back. Cameras zoomed in on Kirk's face, capturing the exact moment his carefully constructed persona shattered. His mouth moved, but no sound came out. The conservative warrior who had made a career of destroying college students in debates had been destroyed himself, not by ideology or rhetoric, but by simple, documented facts about his own educational failures and deceptions. Kirk finally found his voice, but it came out as a weak croak. This is a hit job. You've taken things out of context. My message about education reform stands regardless of. Your message is that education is worthless, Crockett interrupted, her voice now carrying a note of genuine anger. You've convinced thousands of young people to forego opportunities based on your personal resentment. You've turned your own failure into a philosophy that limits others. That's not reform, Mr. Kirk. That's revenge. Revenge against a system that exposed your inadequacy, taken out on young people who might have succeeded where you failed. She closed her folder with finality. I believe in education reform. I believe in making college affordable, in creating alternative paths to success, in valuing trade skills and entrepreneurship. But I also believe in honesty. And you, Mr. Kirk, have built an empire on a fundamental dishonesty, pretending your failure was a choice and selling that lie to vulnerable young people. The attempted response from Kirk was painful to watch. He tried to return to his talking points about liberal indoctrination, about success without degrees, but every word now sounded hollow. The audience could see through the performance to the bitter truth beneath. A man who had failed at education tried to convince others that education itself was the failure. The real tragedy, Crockett added, her voice softer now, almost pitying, is that you could have been honest. You could have said, college wasn't for me, but that doesn't mean it's not for you. You could have advocated for reform without deception. But instead, you chose to tear down what you couldn't achieve and profit from others' doubts. Within seconds of the exchange ending, social media exploded. Hashtag fake degree exposed shot to the top of worldwide trends within minutes. Hashtag Crockett wins followed immediately, along with hashtag Charlie Kirk fraud and hashtag Who is the fraud Charlie. The video clip spread across every platform, shared by people across the political spectrum who appreciated seeing a hypocrite exposed. TikTok creators worked at unprecedented speed, creating videos that looped Crockett's devastating final question with various dramatic soundtracks. One video showed Kirk's face gradually losing color with each revelation, set to the sound of a heart monitor flatlining. Another used a popular caught in 4K audio over his stunned silence. The phrase, "Who's really the fraud here, Charlie?" became instantly iconic, used in contexts far beyond politics. Twitter became a research ground as users dug up every instance of Kirk claiming to have degrees or attacking education. Threads emerged showing the contrast between his public statements about education being worthless and his organization's degree requirements for employees. Screenshots of his false bio claims spread rapidly, each one annotated with "fraud" in red letters. Meme creators had unlimited material. One popular format showed Kirk's face with the caption, "Tells you degrees don't matter," above, and below, "Can't get one himself." Another depicted him as a fox calling grapes sour, with degrees hanging just out of reach. The image of his stunned face after Crockett's final question became the new standard for expressing complete defeat. News networks struggled to cover the story without appearing biased, but the facts were too damaging to spin. CNN replayed the clip hourly, with panels of education experts discussing the implications. Even Fox News, typically friendly to Kirk, had to acknowledge the devastating nature of the revelations. "If these documents are authentic," one host said carefully, "this raises serious questions about Kirk's credibility on education issues." Late-night comedians had material for weeks. Charlie Kirk spent years telling kids college was worthless, Stephen Colbert joked. Turns out he was just mad they wouldn't let him stay. Saturday Night Live created an entire sketch around the confrontation, with the actor playing Kirk literally shrinking as each revelation was presented. For Charlie Kirk, the professional consequences were immediate and severe. Speaking engagements were canceled within hours. Universities that had scheduled debates with him withdrew invitations. His own organization, Turning Point USA, went into crisis mode, with donors demanding explanations and board members calling emergency meetings. Kirk attempted damage control through a lengthy social media post, claiming the documents were misleading and his message remained valid. But the internet had receipts, years of false claims, misleading bios, and hypocritical positions that couldn't be explained away. Every attempt to defend himself only provided more material for mockery. Within his own conservative movement, support evaporated. Other conservative education reformers distanced themselves, not wanting to be associated with someone exposed as a fraud. Young conservatives who had followed his advice began questioning everything he had told them. The movement he had built began fracturing as people realized its foundation was a lie. For Jasmine Crockett, the victory elevated her from congresswoman to cultural icon. Her methodical destruction of Kirk became studied in debate classes as a masterwork of preparation and execution. She had shown that facts, presented calmly and systematically, could destroy even the loudest propaganda. Speaking requests flooded her office, but she was selective, choosing to focus on education reform forums where she could present positive alternatives rather than just criticism. Publishers offered book deals about the value of education and the importance of honesty in public discourse. Universities invited her to give commencement addresses about perseverance and the power of knowledge. The long-term impact on education discourse was significant. Kirk's exposure forced a reckoning within the anti-college movement. Legitimate critics of higher education costs distanced themselves from those who attacked education itself. The conversation shifted from, "Is college worth it?" to, "How can we make college accessible and valuable?" A more productive framework that acknowledged both problems and potential. Young people who had been influenced by Kirk's message began reconsidering their options. Community colleges reported increased enrollment as students realized that struggling with education was better than avoiding it entirely. The false binary of college or success that Kirk had promoted was replaced with a more nuanced understanding of multiple paths to achievement. The phrase, "Who's really the fraud here?" entered the political lexicon as a challenge to hypocrisy in all its forms. It appeared on protest signs, in congressional speeches, and in everyday conversations about authenticity and credibility. It became shorthand for calling out those who criticize what they couldn't achieve or claim expertise they don't possess. Years later, political communication scholars would study the confrontation as a perfect example of ethical destruction, dismantling an opponent not through personal attacks or ideological arguments, but through systematic presentation of documented facts. Crockett had shown that preparation could defeat performance, that research could overcome rhetoric, and that truth, presented clearly, was the ultimate weapon. The CNN studio that had hosted countless debates added this one to its history as perhaps the most one-sided destruction ever broadcast. The bright lights that had illuminated so many political performances had finally illuminated the truth behind one of conservative media's biggest stars. The cameras that had captured his rise had now captured his fall, and the audience that had once cheered his attacks on education had witnessed the consequences of his own educational failures. As one education policy expert would later write, the Kirk-Crockett debate marked a turning point in American discourse about education. It exposed the danger of taking advice about education from those who resent it rather than understand it. Crockett didn't just win a debate, she exposed an entire fraudulent narrative that had influenced millions. The confrontation had lasted less than 15 minutes, but its impact would resonate for years. In those 15 minutes, Jasmine Crockett had not just defeated Charlie Kirk, she had exposed the hollow core of an entire movement built on personal resentment disguised as principle. She had proven that those who attack education most virulently are often those who failed at it most spectacularly. You criticize degrees you never earned, while millions pursue education you tell them to avoid. Who's really the fraud here, Charlie? Those words would echo through American discourse, a reminder that credibility comes from accomplishment, not volume, that expertise requires experience, not just opinion, and that those who tell others to avoid opportunities are often those who couldn't seize them themselves. Charlie Kirk had built an empire on telling others that education was worthless. Jasmine Crockett had destroyed that empire by showing that he was the one who had proven worthless at education.